Okay, what's up, everybody? Pastor Matt here. So tell me the truth. How are you doing? We're obviously in a crazy year here. 2020 is different from any other year that we've ever been through before. Let me know, how are you doing emotionally? How are you doing mentally? Today, what we're going to do is we're going to review the results of the new Gallup poll survey on mental health across the board. I will tell you this, I don't want to bury the lead. There's one factor that is shown to increase one's mental health during these unusual coronavirus lockdown times, and that is church attendance. I cannot be more thrilled with the results of the survey. Across the board, the results are down, 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 which of course is the bad news. But the one thing that is showing actual cause for mental health increase in excellence is those who attend church regularly. Well, let's go ahead and talk about that today. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Pastor Matt Everhard. I'm the pastor of Gospel Fellowship, PCA. If you're looking for a Bible-believing Reformed church, we are just north of Pittsburgh. We'd love to see you. By the way, we are open even during these lockdowns, so come visit us, Gospel Fellowship, PCA, just north of Pittsburgh. All right, so Gallup poll recently did a survey on mental health, and what we're going to do today is we're going to review the results of that survey, and I want to share for you that the one factor that seems to make the most difference towards positivity is how often one attends worship. All right, can't believe it, but it's true. There it is. So let's get into sort of a good news, bad news situation here. Now, the good news is simply this. All right, if you take the survey results and you add the good and the excellent scores together, it's going to be 76%. Okay, so that's not bad. Most people around you, most people walking through the aisles at Walmart, most people that are your neighbors living down the street, they really are doing okay. What Gallup poll did is they asked people to survey themselves. So these aren't clinical analyses or anything like that. These are people's self-assessments of just simply how they're doing. And most people, 76%, say that they are doing good to excellent in terms of their overall mental health. Now, the bad news is that is a drop from most every other year. In fact, it's the first time that that number, good and excellent put together, drops below the 80th percentile. And normally that score is somewhere between 81 and 89%. So while the good news is that most people are still technically doing okay, the bad news is that there is a notable drop this year, 2020, the first time below the 80th percentile for those two scores, good and excellent, added together. Now, continuing on with the bad news, that drop is seen across the board in almost every category of classification. So we're talking about whether your gender is male or female, whether your race is this or that, whether your politics are Republican or Democratic, whether you are married or single, whether your income is high or low. Unfortunately, the bad news is that those scores have dropped universally and across the board, except for in the one category of church attendance, which is causing people to rise in mental health in terms of excellence this year. So let's get into it. Well, first of all, what is mental health? Now, this isn't going to be a precise definition here, but mental health has to do with how we're doing in our cognitive and our emotional capacity. So we're talking about things like joy, whether or not we experience a deep sense of purpose in our lives, whether we have a healthy perspective on reality, how the world is unfolding around us, whether we have peace in our hearts and our relationships with other people. If you're generally in a constant, kind of a constant, above board sort of a mode, then that's to be described as good. On the other hand, a negative mental health would include such factors as fear, high levels of anxiety, if you suffer from severe guilt, depression, of course, other complications. And all those things have clinical definitions here. But remember, in this survey done by Gallup poll, these are not the results of clinical analyses from some sort of psychoanalysis or clinical psychologist, office or something like that. These are people assessing themselves. And so Gallup poll asked people to rate themselves under these four categories. How is your mental health doing? Is it excellent? Is it good? Is it fair? or is it poor? Now, let me just go ahead and give you the scores for all those. 34% said that they were doing excellent, and 42% said that they were doing good. And I'll just tell you right there that that 42% that said that they were good, that's the highest of the 4 categories. And so generally, most people are doing good or excellent. When you get into the category of fair, which means you're doing so-so, the percentage drops significantly to 18, and then only 5% of people actually classified themselves as doing poorly in terms of their mental health. So again, it's not that every single person that you see is going through some sort of acute mental health crisis, but across the board, the scores are down from the average normally in the 80s to 76 this year. Now, what explains that? Well, the obvious suggestion is that the coronavirus has something to do with that. And not only just the coronavirus in general in terms of a pandemic, but more specifically, I think too, the lockdowns have had a deleterious effect on our mental health. Now, you add the lockdowns with the fear of the pandemic. Some of us actually know people who have died or have suffered through the virus, so that's obviously going to hurt quite a bit in our hearts. We're homebound. Most of us are experiencing lockdowns. I know here in Pennsylvania, we just got hit last night with another set of lockdown restrictions from our governor. Our ability to go out and exercise right now is not great because the weather is cold, and moreover, many of the gyms are closed. We don't have as many social outlets. I just got some bad news that my son's wrestling team is now going to go on hiatus until January. So we're missing out on all these activities. My daughter wasn't able to graduate in a normal fashion earlier this spring. Many sports are closed off or shut down completely, with the rare exception of professional sports on TV, which aren't all that terribly thrilling to watch with nobody in the stands. And then, of course, 2020 has been extremely political, more so than practically any other year. So you begin to put all those things together, and no wonder people are sensing a lowering of their overall mental health. Now, I'm going to break down some of these categories, and I think you're going to find that they're very, very interesting. So let's start off first with the category of gender. And you're not going to like me necessarily for the results here, but I'm just the intermediary here who's delivering the results of the survey. I'm certainly not suggesting anything about the betterment or worst state of anybody here, but men ranked far better than women when it came to rating themselves as excellent. Now, the rest of these numbers that I'm going to give you today, these have to do with the excellent category. Who rated themselves in excellent mental health? Well, 41% of men did, and only 27% of women did. Now, that number 27 jumps off on the charts because that's going to be one of the lowest categories of all of the other categories and factors that we're going to talk about today, tied with a few others. And so men, 41%, women, only 27% rated themselves excellent. Now, that's a decline for both genders, though, because men went down 8 points and women went down 10 points. And so, in general, it would seem that men rate their mental health as higher than women do. Now, when we get into age, we're going to break it down, or at least Gallup pulled it into 4 categories. 18 to 29, 28%, that's pretty low, said that they were doing excellent. That's down 9%. And it gets a little bit better as they get older. If you're 30 to 49, 32% said that they were doing excellent, but that's down 8%. Age 50 to 64, 42% said that they were doing excellent. That's the highest number of any age division, but that's still down 9%. And then if you're 65 years or older, only 34% said that they were doing excellent. That's down 10 points, which is the greatest decline in the age. So looking at that, what we can generally say is that the youngest people of all are experiencing the highest amounts of anxiety, whereas those people in what we might think of as the most productive years of their lives, the most successful years, perhaps in terms of their professional career, 42%, that's the highest number on the board. But notice again, across every single age group, they're down about 10 points just from last year, 2019, in a pre-pandemic year. Now, let's go into politics. This is going to be a little bit fun here. And both the red states and the blue states are going to get a big yahoo when I read off the numbers because, you know, like most statistics, you can make with them what you want. So let me just drop the bomb here on Republicans first of all. Republicans, if you're a Republican, if you're a conservative, Mental health, self-reported as excellent, down 15 points. That is the biggest decline across the entire board. Okay, it's not the lowest total number of people who rate themselves excellent by percentage, but it is the biggest percentage in decline. Republicans are down 15% in their self-described mental health. Well, why would that be? Well, obviously, they took a big hit in the election as Donald Trump apparently lost the election. I'm not going to get into all of those things about what the lawsuits are going to do, the recounts, the Supreme Court if they get involved. I'm not going to get into that. But Republicans certainly are not in a very cheerful mood here at the end of 2020. Down 15%. And so the Democrats say, aha, we told you so. We Democrats, we are cruising. We are doing just fine, but wait. Actually, no. Although Republicans took the greatest decrease, down 15%, and Democrats only went down 1% in terms of their self-rating of excellence, yet Democrats only 29% rate themselves as excellent. So that's notably lower than Republicans. So the Republicans can cheer and they can say, see, we're way down and we're still way better than the Democrats in terms of their mental health. So you might enjoy that particular category. Both red and blue have something to brag about there. Let's go on to marriage as a categorization. Unmarrieds here are going to share with women the lowest number on the board, which is 27% self-rating as excellent. That's down 10% from just last year. Whereas married people also down 8%, but their self-rating of excellent in terms of their mental health is much higher at 41%. So if you're married, 41% excellent. If you're unmarried, only 27% rating themselves as excellent. Getting into money. Here we're going to find something very interesting. Once again, this shared number, the lowest on the board, 27%, that is unfortunately held by those who make less than $40,000 a year. So if you make less than 40, maybe you're just getting started. Maybe you're one of those young people, first job, second job, working your way up. Your self-excellence is down 6% in terms of mental health from just last year. Only 27% rate themselves excellent. If you talk about those who make $40,000 to $99,000, now that's probably going to be a lot of people. That's going to be your so-called middle class for the most part. $40,000 to $99,000. Only 31% are rating themselves excellent, and they took a big hit this year. They're down 12% from last year. And those who make more than $100,000, they also took a big double-digit percentage hit at -12 from last year. However, they have a 45% self-rating of excellence, which is one of the higher numbers on the board. Now, that's a little bit puzzling to me because, of course, as Bible-believing Christians, one of the things that we commonly repeat and we can substantiate in Scripture is that money does not bring happiness. Well, we're not exactly talking about happiness. We're talking about mental health here and all of these statistics. But certainly it would seem that those who make more money have a greater self-awareness of mental health at 45% versus somewhere around 30 for the other income ratings. Why would that be? Well, it doesn't necessarily have to do with money, and that's what I'm going to contend here. And what I'm going to say is a sweeping generalization here, but those who tend to make more than $100,000, these are the people that tend to be very competent in their skills. Many of them are highly trained. Many of them have gone through vast amounts of education. Many of them have careers that are deeply meaningful in things like law and medicine or business. Some of them are highly driven, self-motivated people, the kind of people that get up very early, get working, work hard throughout the days. They come home, they crash, they're tired, and they do it all again the next day. So it might not have to do with the money in the bank as much as it does the purposefulness of getting up every day with some drive to accomplish. Now, I'm not saying, and please don't hear me say, that those who make less money than $100,000 don't have that kind of purpose. But if we're talking about competency hierarchies, and certainly at the top of competency hierarchies are those who make the most money, it may sound unfair to you, but some of these people are highly conscientious and dutiful in their patterns of behavior. So it's not the money necessarily that brings the mental health, but it could be that purposefulness that is intrinsically it keeps one in a constant state of mental health. Now, here's my favorite factor of all. Let's get into church activity here. I'm so glad that Gallup poll added this to their classifications. The biggest number on the board is a mental health rating of excellent at 46%. 46%, and that is of those who attend religious services weekly. And this is the only number on the board. This is a statistical anomaly here, so we should definitely pay attention to this. This is the only one that actually increased in 2020 as over against 2019 at +4. So compared to even last year, churchgoers, regular weekly churchgoers, are +4 compared to 2019. That's astounding. It's the only number on the board in the positive. Everything else I've said so far in this entire analysis has been in the negative. Now, those who attend a church monthly do substantially less well in terms of mental health. Only 35% rate themselves as excellent. That's down -12. So that's a 16-point swing in the difference between attending church weekly as versus monthly. And then you can go even less than that. If you go down to those who attend church seldom or never, those who rate themselves as excellent, only 29%, one of the lowest numbers on the board, down -13% from just last year. So obviously there is some sort of joyful, a purposeful correlation here between regular, weekly, faithful worship of the great and living God as over those who are negligent in their Christian duties or do not participate at all. Now, are you ready to be offended? Okay. So what I did is I took those categories and I compiled them into what we might call a composite person. Okay. So let's sum up here. Who are the happiest people across the board, or at least those who perceive themselves to be the most mentally healthy? Those categories would be a male who is a Republican, who attends church weekly, who is married, who is age 50 to 64, who's making $100,000 or more. You may not like it. You may say that's the patriarchy. You may say it's unfair. Call it oppressive, whatever you do, but simply call it the results of the survey. That's all I can say about that. And let's do the contrary too, just for the sake of interest here. The least mentally excellent person at this time, self-described, okay, not clinically diagnosed, but self-described, female Democrat who never attends church, single, ages 18 to 29, and makes less than $40,000 a year. Now let's go back to that one category in which people are thriving. Again, the big E on the eye chart here is that every number across the board is down in 2020, the pandemic lockdown year, as compared to other years, except for one category, and that is people who attend church weekly. They're actually up with the highest numbers on the board of self-rating of mental health as excellent. Why is that? Well, I think it's obvious. And it should become obvious by now that those who have the greatest amount of peace, joy, happiness, purpose, security, focus, it's because they're doing exactly what God made them to do, which is to worship the great and living God. And so they do that week in and week out. They have purpose. They serve. Many of them do. If they're not preaching, maybe they're teaching, maybe they're handing out bulletins, maybe they're preparing the communion elements, maybe they're welcoming people in, maybe they're ushering, maybe they're running the soundboard, whatever it is. They have a purpose. They're doing it. They have joy. These deep relationships are being satisfied and fostered. Friendships are being made. Old friendships are being sustained. And I really do that there's a spiritual component in this as well. That when you go to worship, you repent of your sins, you feel this incredible feeling of exhilaration as you remember that your sin has been atoned for, your guilt has been taken away by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you are doing exactly what God made us to do, which is to worship Him. So why wouldn't you do it? There appears to be something that you can actually change in your life that will cause you to have greater amounts of peace, joy, happiness, purpose, and fulfillment, and that is to go to worship week in and week out. Now listen, there's a few things on that board that you can't change. You can't change your gender, you can't change your race, you can't change your age except by getting older. You might try really, really hard to change your income bracket, and maybe you're successful at that, and maybe you're not, but you could change this week by starting to worship on a regular basis. Do what you have to do. If your church isn't open, well, by golly, come find one that is. Gospel Fellowship PCA, man, we are open. We're having 3 services on the Lord's Day. If you can't be with us in person, worship with us virtually. But we have a masked service in the evening. You can come to that and feel secure. There's plenty of space to worship in the sanctuary. And so I would encourage you, if you're a pastor, man, get your church open for the sake of your people. And if you are a member of a Bible-believing, gospel-preaching church, then go to your church, worship with the people of God, trust Him for your health, and perhaps you might even find yourself with greater amounts of joy and security in those other categories as well. Well, thank you so much for checking into this video. I hope you learned something. I know I did. And even though it's a difficult year, we put our hope and our trust in the great and living God. Thanks for checking in. Do love you lots, and we'll talk to you later.